Hey guys, welcome back. It's your host Kev here. So today we're going to be breaking down an article that I read. This was in relation to the Troad in Anatolia being allegedly founded by the Greeks, and I'll give a quick brief rundown of what the article is, and then I'll put a link in the description. I was going to read the article out, but it's going to take 10 minutes to read the article, and to be honest, it's time consuming, and I'd rather just give you an overview, put the link in, and anyone else can go and read it and make up their own mind. But this is basically a story about someone called Troad, who allegedly came from the island of Crete, went over into Anatolia and founded a kingdom there, and then another person called Dardanus, who came from allegedly Attica in Greece, moved over, combined with Troad, and then they began a kingdom over there. It goes into Wilusa being being a Hittite name attributed to Troy, and a conflict taking place there. And it goes into some other details, he talks about the grandson of he talks about a grandson named Iliad, who was the son of Troad. Now Troad apparently was, a grandson, I believe, actually, of this Troad. He allegedly claimed that he named the kingdom that he inherited as the Trojans, and that's why the area was called the Troad. And he had a son called Iliad, and Iliad apparently went into Phrygia, met a king of Phrygia, had a wrestling tournament. He won the tournament, and then the king in Phrygia gave him a cow, and then he basically said, wherever this cow stops, that's where you can build a city. And then that city was apparently named after Iliad, and became Troy, or Ilium, as it's referenced in the Iliad, hence why it's called the Iliad. Now, that's basically the nuts and bolts of this article. It does reference that the war took place in the 8th century, and he believes that these people travelled over from Crete around the 9th century. So this is a pretty condensed period of time, and he goes on to talk about some restoration work that took place in Thessaly. There have been various people who've questioned whether Wilusa is even Troy in the first place, and Wilusa was just its own city. Hey guys, sorry, I've just been doing the edit there, and I noticed I missed out a key component. In the article, he makes reference to Alexandros. Now, Alexandros is a name that's in the Hittite tablet, and he's mentioned to have been a ruler of Wilusa in around the 14th century BCE. Now, bearing in mind that this person referenced in the article that he believes the conflict took place in the 8th century, and to draw this link, he's out by several hundred years. Now, also, one of the things that I forgot to mention as well was that the city of Wilusa, there's two cities mentioned in the tablet, and they're both distinct cities. It's not the same, where it's Wilusa, and there's another word beginning with T. I'll source it out, so I'll put it in on the screen now. And these are two distinct cities, and obviously the Hittites make reference of them having a conflict with the Agaean, and they make reference of them attacking the city of Wilusa themselves, and that is going back several hundred years before this Trojan War in the article, that is of around the 8th century. So there's a lot of conflation that's took place in the article. There's also going to be a few more, well, at least one more video relating to the islands of the Mediterranean around this period, around the 11th century BCE. Now, this person's obviously made everything 950 and beyond, or should I say 950 to around 700 BCE. There's no mention in any Hittite record that I'm aware of, as I think I said in the recording, of a conflict taking place in this area. Say, obviously the Hittites had a conflict with certain fractions in the area going back to like the 15th century, 14th century BCE, which is even too old for any theory on the Trojan War. So for this kingdom to have been fully established and be the dominant force in all of Asia would imply, which is stated in the Iliad, would imply that this Troy on the Troad in Anatolia, that is claimed to be Wilusa, would have to have been established for a long period of time and powerful enough to draw the attention of dozens of other kings and rulers to support the cause. Also, Priam had 50 sons. Obviously, Alexander, Paris was the youngest son of Priam, which is like why he feels cursed. You know, he states in I think it's Hitite's version, that when he goes to speak to Achilles to ask for Hector back, he speaks of the fact that people say how blessed he was, but yeah, he feels he was cursed with Alexander or Paris, and his wife actually had a premonition, a dream, where she foreseen that Troy would burn because of a baby, and it was only Antenor and who's the other one? And Aeneas, sorry, was the other person. Only those two would survive the destruction of Troy. So there's a bit of a, you know, that kingdom would have to be powerful and massive. And if we're talking about a tribe that's just been established within 100 years in a whole new territory that's already occupied by a pretty dominant force, which was the Hittites, then it doesn't make any sense. And the dates are all over the place anyway. And looking into a little bit the wording of Wilusa, obviously translated from Hittite as Wilusa, apparently into Greek, Ionian Greek, that'd be as Ilias or Ilium. Well, it turns out that it actually takes a little bit of forcing of the wording, the phonetics, a bit of phoneticology. I think the term was used when I was reading up on it, as you've got to have the will to want to make these words fit. And also, like I say, there's two cities anyway, and there's no reference to Troy being next to another city. And in the Iliad that I'm aware of, and I've worked my way through quite a lot of it now, and also the other two versions which I've listened to, I've actually put their daughters and dictates into an audio format, which I'm gonna upload and put on the channel. It's from the book that I've just done, so it's about 5 hours long, 5.5 hours long, but that's for anyone who's like just hasn't got the time to read the books, then you'll be able to have a little listen. So yeah, sorry for this edit and this insert, but like I say, there's no true reference to Wilusa being Troy. There's certain indicators, certain words that sound similar, but then the geography is unknown. There's another city that's not referenced. The dating is way out, like especially in relation to this article. It's a lot closer to my hypothesized, theorized dates, but it's even several hundred years older than that. So you say, I mean, it takes a little bit of faith to arrive at the conclusions in this article, to say the least. But yeah, back to the video. As we've discussed and stuff in various other forms in these videos, but that's basically the nuts and bolts of the article. So I'm going to go in, and I've typed out quite a lengthy response here. So like I say, I didn't really want to read the article and then go straight into that because it has been too much. So let's get straight into it. Off of the bat here, he makes reference of a date of this movement from the peoples of Crete into Anatolia around 900 to 950 BCE. Again, not very specific, but I get what he's saying. There was a record, also he claims, from the 4th century BCE that supports this notion that Dardanus married into the royal house of Crete. That's, again, not a specific, he hasn't gave any specific name for this citation. He's just made a claim that there's a 4th century reference, but there's no reference for the reference, if that makes sense. He also claims, as I said, that Tros, the person's called Tros, his son Ilius founded the city of Ilium. Now, he claims that was after winning a wrestling match, and the cow, that was the reward from the king of Phrygia. Wherever it rested, he could found a city. Well, no king of Phrygia is mentioned in the article, nor the location of the Phrygian city, or how far the cow had wandered before the city was founded. Because he does also reference in the article that when the Troyes and Dardanus settled in the area of Anatolia, it was at the foot of Mount Ida, which, to be honest, is like 70 miles away from Hisarlik, the place he's claiming to be Ilium. So, I mean, I don't know whether the cow was wandering from this central point around the foothills of Ida, or actually into Phrygia. In either case, it must have been some considerable distance for this cow to just wander before it stopped and rested. So, but we'll come on to things like that as we move forward. I find it odd that the prince or King Ilus, as it's not really stated too well, I do not know if he was one way or the other, allegedly renamed the kingdom set up by Teucer after himself. Well, sorry, that was Tros who renamed the kingdom, but Ilus obviously founded the city Troy and the Trojans and all that good stuff. Or why the unnamed king of Phrygia would allow a foreign power to establish a city and expand their kingdom into his territory. Again, like, if you're a king and you've got this force, this peoples who've come from Crete, who have come into the area of Phrygia, I'm guessing at this time. I mean, the article doesn't state if there was any conflict. So was this just an open area of land, and these Greeks have just wandered in, took over this land, and found abandoned cities and all this stuff, as we go on to. The article also claims the Greeks and Trojans had close ties. This is, however, a misconception, as the Greeks would not have existed at this time, as we shall see later, and a new language actually came into the area post the Trojan War and before the end of the Mycenaean culture. So if these were Greeks who had left Crete, they must have been Mycenaean folk, not the technical Greeks that we think of like later on down the line. Like I've said in previous videos, the conflict in the Trojan War was between the Achaeans and the Trojans, and some conflate the word Greek with Agaean, as the word Greek is being conflated with Mycenaean right now, because obviously the Greeks and the city-states of the Aegean predominantly come from like Athens and places like that as the main focal point, the mainland. There was areas like they say the Mycenaeans potentially came from north, like Macedonia and places like that, and came into the area. But we'll cover more of that stuff as we go forward. The article speaks of Wilusa and Aluvian culture. He claims that the only record in the article that survives of this tale, in essence, and this culture in that area is of Luwian descent, which again we shall touch on that in a little bit. There is also reference in the Hittite records regarding the conflict, as is claimed, of the conflict of Wilusa, with the claim that Troy was called Wilusa in the Hittite record, when actually this is not the case. This is a theoretical claim and not one based on a literal translation. As he then states, the Hittite translation for Wilusa is the word Ilios. That refers to Ilion. So by that logic, the Hittites had several names for the city. And this, again, is without any actual references that I could find in the Hittite text themselves of a city that had a 10-year conflict. But again, we shall cover a little bit more of that as we move forward. He then claims that the Greek settlers, whom he also claims are Trojans, from Crete, came into Anatolia and reworked the old city of Wilusa. That had been conquered by the Hittites, which is apparently where the trophy cow chose to stop and where to build the new city as ordained, if you will, by the Phrygian king, which would imply that the cow stopped at the ruined city, as we touched on. To be fair, this article also states that Tusir founded the city of Wilusa, yet the founded city had already had a conflict with the Hittites, as I said, and had already been destroyed, as claimed in the article, in 950 BCE. So it's a little bit weird to understand where the logic is coming from here, because he claims that these people came in from Crete, these Greeks, landed at the foothills of the Ida, Mount Ida, then spread out from there to found a kingdom. Then one of the grandsons of Troyes founded, or great-grandson, founded the city of Ilium, which was the older Wilusa, which we know as Troy. So it's weird because it's hard to understand the geography and the timeline fully here, because if the Hittites had destroyed the city Wilusa, then why would they reference the city as a Trojan city? And why would the cow stop at a ruined city miles away from wherever this tournament must have taken place? As the city is a ruined city, there was no one there. So it's a bit strange. To be fair, this article has the weight of the mainstream behind it, which, once you look into a little bit, there's a lot of mainstream articles that kind of support this claim. And a year ago, I would have said it makes sense. However, there are a lot of elements left out that have not been taken into account. This person believes the Trojan War took place in the 8th century BCE, though no Greek has ever made a claim, nor is there a Hittite claim to a conflict at this period in Anatolia. Perhaps minor conflicts that you might pick up little pieces here and there, but there's definitely no mention of a 10-year siege regarding close to 1 million people involved. You know, if anyone is aware of the Dikites and Daras information, then Daras actually gives a specific number on the number of people that was involved in the conflict, who died anyway. So God knows how many were injured as well, but that's in a previous video. Could the Trojans from Crete have actually been Trojans? Could this be, excuse me, how the tale got mingled up with this mythological account? So again, he claims that Troyes had a son or grandson, Tros, and it was him who decided to change the name of the people, the kingdom, which again, you know, people are generally, a culture is generally associated with the land, very rarely with the leader or the king. Like, we use that kind of in a reference these days, actually saying in Britain we'll have like the Georgians or the Victorians, but what that is, we're stating a period of time here to which like architecture, industry, craftsmanship, all this kind of stuff is associated with them periods. It didn't actually change the name of Britain or the British people, it's just a period within there, where this article states that the entire kingdom was renamed, the newly founded capital that they built on the foothills of Ida was renamed, and then obviously Troy, Ilium, or Hisarlik as it's claimed, Wilusa as well, even many names. So that was my quick little run through of the article. Now let us add some more context and some extra colour to the picture, if you will. I would like to note the city I mentioned in the last video that was passed on to me to check out by Daniela, one of my subscribers, and apologies for getting your name wrong, by the way, Daniela, and thanks for that link, was actually Ebla, another theorised conflict mentioned on one of the Hittite war tablets from Hattusha. So actually I can't remember if I put a little segment in here about Ebla, but perhaps that's a video I will come on to cover more in the future, because it's quite interesting really. From what I can tell, Wilusa in the Hittite records of war was in Western Anatolia, and the Ahiawa perhaps may represent the Mycenaeans. If this is true, there is record of Mycenaeans fighting in Anatolia from around the 15th century BCE. However, I found there are 4 possible conflicts that occurred between the 15th to the 13th centuries, including a revolt of Wilusa against the Hittites and the conflict between the Hittites and the Ahiawa. The Ahiawa, by the way, it's an area in the southern part of Western Anatolia, not the northern part by the Dardanelles. And we've translated the word Ahiawa in previous videos. The Ahiawa being the Trojans / Sea Peoples, from what I can understand, are not Mycenaeans, so not even the precursors to those Greeks. What is not mentioned in the text is the arrival of an invading or a migrating culture that moved onto the island of Crete and replaced the Mycenaean culture there, with a new language arriving there also. These people are referred to as the Dorians. Cool name, the Dorians. Durin's folk reminds me of like Lord of the Rings. For me, these people were the Sea Peoples, a movement of people leaving a potential Trojan conflict in Britain around this period, as we'll see in a moment. A quote from Britannica regarding this, and a quote now: "The Ahiawa, also called the Ahiwa, was an ancient kingdom lying to the west of the Hittite Empire. The exact location of Ahiawa is not definitely known, but may have been in Western Anatolia or one of the islands in the Aegean Sea." Dun, dun, dun. The most commonly held theory is that the people of the Ahiawa were the Agaeans of Homer. Bum, bum, bum. In any case, it seems quite certain that the Ahiawa were a powerful seafaring people, unquote. Now, it says there, the Agaeans from Homer, but as the article stated, the Agaeans and the Trojans, as presented in previous videos, you've got the Agaeans from Argos, Belgium, Denmark, up them regions of the northwestern part of Europe, and obviously the Trojans in Britain, and they were very much connected as a culture in terms of their gods, their philosophy, and certain other things. Though I've seen some reference that they believe like the Trojans of Britain at the time were more like biblical people. And to be honest, we will be touching on that kind of context a little bit more as we look at the connection between Phoenicia and Britain, because the material I've got there, it ties into Phoenicia and Sumer. Obviously Hittites kind of sandwiched in there, in and around there. And then you've got this ancient Brythonic culture, going back to around 3,000 years ago, and even before that period, but we'll touch on all that as we move forward. Given the tablet state that these are the peoples in reference, it may have been either the force being removed from the island of Crete, or indeed an expansion force of a newly settled population known to have pushed into the area. The Dorians were a tribe, as I say, said to have invaded Greece by all ancient accounts, a short time after the Trojan War. Landing on Crete and around the Aegean some 3,100 years ago, right in the ballpark, which began a new language structure and began the cultural changes that would lead up to the classical Greece period. So the language that was used in classical Greece and things like that found its roots in this Dorian migration or invasion, as presented by some. Also, the text of the Tawagalawa, I'll put that on the screen, letter is said to have come from the mid-13th century BC. This period, give or take a few hundred years, fits like a glove in my eyes to what I have stated above and in previous videos. And to be honest, like I say, the more you look at these things, the chronology is, it's not totally specific. You can't pin it down to the exact date because there's many different reference points and different theories, so you've kind of got to find your way through it a little bit. But this is the period when the Mycenaean palaces were destroyed on Crete, theorized by earthquake, though the sea peoples wreaked havoc in Egypt and the Levant also, and potentially could have brought about this destruction of palaces, to which the Philistines settle in this period in modern day Palestine. The Battle of Kadesh takes place, and the whole raft of other significant reformation and advancements, etc., take place in the area. L.A. Waddell links the Hittites to Britain, but it is the Phoenicians specifically he builds his premise around. And you know what? Let's have a little look there quick. This is the book right here that I will be doing some readings out of fairly soon. But if you look at this, pictures like this, I think I might have showed some of this in the previous video. There's many connections between old coins found in Britain and across in Phoenicia. Got things like this, and a lot of it predominantly, according to Mr. Waddell, is regarding like a solar worship. You know, you've got like plenty of information about the spirals that you find in ancient stone blocks, ancient writings and things like that. And as I say, he ties this stuff right back into like Sumeria. It's like if you look at this image, I'm sure you'd be able to draw some parables off that instantly to some images you would have come across regarding ancient Sumer. And he links these deities and names, and it's quite interesting, to be honest. And like I say, we are going to go through some of this book and talk about it. There's a lot of information in there, and I don't really want to put too much into this video right now, but we're going to do separate videos. I want to do actual readings from the book and maybe do a little bit discussion about the information. So as I say, there was a whole leveling up of the area, and if you look into the accounts, which is claimed in this video, in this article, that the war took place in the 8th century, so that's the 700s. Well, this is just coming into the period of classical Greece, so you think there'd be more writers than ever in this period that would, There was more writers ever in this period, and none of them actually corroborate the claims in the Greek writing of this area, of this conflict, and of this movement of peoples from Crete and all that kind of stuff. As he mentions Virgil and the Aeneid, Virgil was Roman. It was actually thought that some people have claimed that he was Greek and then Roman, but whatever. Perhaps the culture we know of as the Mycenaeans were in fact the sea peoples. This war was well documented, yet centuries later there is no other references around the Aegean or Western Anatolia or anywhere that references Wilusa as Troy and the fleet of 1,000 ships, or a giant fleet anyway, or armies, a giant army, except for Homer, Dithytes and Dares, which, as I mentioned before in other videos, are the oldest copies, full-bodied copies to be found, and they're all written in Latin, not Greek, not Luwian, not Hittite, not Egyptian, not Akkadian, not Assyrian. They're written in Latin from Europe. There is also no history in the record of these claims from Greece or any Hittite tablet, or no archaeology to validate this claim. To say, people have made theories about Hisarlik and stuff like that, but once you start looking into the topography of the area, it just doesn't fit. In popular writings, these anecdotes have been interpreted as evidence for a historical kernel in myth and of the Trojan War. Myths and the Trojan War. However, scholars have found no historical evidence for any particular event of these legends, and the Hittite documents do not state that Wilusa / Troy was ever attacked, and nor does it mention the Greeks or / the Achiawa. Again, the Achiawa is an older word for the people that became the Greeks, if that makes sense. Or we have discussed other variations of this word, the Achiawa or the Akiwasa, otherwise known none other than the Achaeans themselves. Moving forward, a quote from the Hittitologist Trevor Bryce cautions that, I'm sweating here, our current understanding of Wilusa's history does not provide evidence for there ever having been an actual war / Trojan War, since in this area of Anatolia there is no record of this. And I'll quote this person now: "The less material one has, the more easily it can be manipulated to fit whatever conclusion one wishes to come up with," which is what has kind of took place in this article. The Minoans, the Bronze Age civilization of Crete, allegedly flourished from around 3000 BC to 1100 BCE, before later supposedly being occupied, the island that is, by the Mycenaean culture. Agriculture and trade allowed the formation of large centralized centers at Knossos, which shows for me a clear indication that Komos became an important port in the Aegean, with evidence of contact with mainland Greece, Phoenicia and the Near East, and I would say with Britain, given the very active and renowned tin, copper and bronze mines known to be producing great quantities of raw materials dug from the earth and found along the Mediterranean, which we will look at that at the end of this video. This for me is a significant link, as I am conceptualizing, got a dry throat, the potentiality of a migration from Britain to this area after the fall of Troy in East Anglia in England. This link, as we shall see, displays influence also seen in language and art. If you are familiar with the work of L.A. Waddell and Wilson and Blackett, they both have differing accounts and a vastly differing theory well, especially to my own anyway. Yet they themselves point out that there are many correlations between the Phoenician, Assyrian, and Hittite cultures to Britain. So, as we just looked at Waddle there, and there's a Wilson and Blackett book kicking around somewhere, he makes reference to quite a bit of stuff as well. I would claim, as stated, through long-standing trade and the transference of knowledge and culture based on archaeological record of things like the tin trade and artistic goods like pottery, jewellery, etc. Excuse me, my throat is really dry. Transferring far more intimate perceptions and philosophy than just goods, i.e. philosophical ideology, religion, culture, kingship, structure, politics, like say art, poetry, all these kind of things, symbolism. The Greek Mycenaean civilization is known for its fortified cities like Mycenae, Tiryns, and Argos of the Aegean, though Iman would disagree with these names being the originals, and I tend to agree with him. Though I must mention that the Western Europeans who claim descent from these mythological characters of Greece did not see them as mythical, but as historical. So just think about that. As I said, Dares, Dicates, their works were prominent in Europe up until around the 10th century when you get the Vinicius A manuscript. So these peoples in that area, they genuinely believed that they were of Trojan stock, and the story there was a lot more intense than it was over in the Near East or the Eastern Mediterranean areas. As so, Crete later became an important Greek island state during what was known as the classical period of Greek history of the Aegean, of which much of the Greek writing took place that we are familiar with today, from Solon, Plato, Pindar, Socrates, Diodorus, Xenophon, Hesiod, Euclid, both Zenos, amongst many others, including Homer. Not necessarily from the island of Crete, I mean this classical period. Many of these authors / historians, mathematicians and philosophers' original works do not survive, which leaves much open to speculation on the dating and the authenticity of their works, as we have come to discover regarding, well, a few different things in these investigations. I still have yet to do my breakdown on Homer, so keep an eye out for that one, which I do. I still have a pretty good breakdown to do on Homer. We haven't got there yet, but it is coming. The classical period would be the period of around 200 years from the 5th century to the 4th centuries BCE, which is a lot of scholarship in a short space of time, at least in comparison to many other cultures that we are aware of. Though few wrote of this Trojan War at Hisarlik or of the mythology of Prince Ilias, and those who again spoke of these things predominantly spoke as mythology. Excuse me. Homer and a few others were said to have lived and died before the writings were alleged to have been written in Greece, as we shall touch on again soon. The Peloponnesian War in ancient Greece left scars on much of the eastern Aegean and northern regions of the Greek culture, such as Ionia and Macedonia. After gaining increased autonomy from the Persian Empire, and was the peak flourishing of democratic Athens. Excuse me. This war of 431 and 404 BCE fought between Athens and Sparta and their respective allies. The war remained undecided for a long time until the decisive intervention of the Persian Empire in support of Sparta. Yet nowhere do we have record of this Wilusa or Troy over in Anatolia, with Pergamon being the closest city to the alleged Hisarlik or Troy, being on the same peninsula, and certainly not having no surviving testimony, reports, or records in their history of this massive and brutal 10-year war. So there's no record of the conflict, and there's no record of the rebuilding of this city. And that's coming from Pergamon, which is around the 5th century, which is only 300 years before claimed by this article. So you'd think that the memory of the conflict in these people's minds would be massive, probably be descendants of these people. Nor do we have any likewise accounts of a previous founding or destruction of this powerful city-state standing in 400 BC, as I just said, that had been razed to the ground as early as 650 BC, as some have claimed. Indeed, 800 BC either, or 700 BC, or 1100 BC. In fact, we found the mainstream conveniently claims that the historic site contains layer upon layer of ancient settlements from the first circa 3000 BCE up until 500 BCE, just in time to be unimportant. So, right when you're starting to get this classical period, it's like this ancient settlement that had been there forever in the Aegean obviously just disappears. There is a theory I touched on briefly in my last video of a Mesopotamian story found on a tablet at Hattusa, which is another one of these war tablets, that was written in cuneiform in both Hittite and Hurrian. That's the Hurrians. Apparently they did a lot more writing than the Hittites. That speaks of a town or city called Ebla in northern Syria. Again, not the location of Hisarlik. That was transferred to the Hittite culture from Mesopotamia. So that conflict is not even necessarily documented through the memory of the Hittites. It's more a memory that's being transferred into the culture and documented. The story goes, the city was besieged as the king or leadership of the city refused to release captives they held. The city was allegedly destroyed. This is what some believed, and I am inclined to agree, is the basis of some of the mythology regarding a city conflict in this part of the world. However, there is very little known regarding this destroyed city other than the information contained on the tablet, and the theory is still controversial and lacking in the physical archaeological department. Back to Crete. Its name derives from Minos, the name of a mythological ruler of Crete, King Minos, who was son of Zeus and Europa, supposedly the mother of Europe as well, I've heard some believe, who every 9 years he made King Aegeus pick 7 young boys and 7 young girls to be offered as sacrifice to the Minotaur by being set loose into a great labyrinth to where the half man, half beast would devour his sacrificial victims. Since the late 19th century, archaeologists, documentary makers and novelists have asserted that the Cretan labyrinth, the lair of the terrifying Minotaur, was a real place. But now, as a few major papers have discussed, that legendary maze was just that, a legend, a figment of imagination, or collective imagination, you might say. So there's no actual record of this king of Minos, and a lot of the references rely heavily on mythology, though some attribute the king to the mythology and use him to create narratives of this mighty Greek ruler, whom was alluded to in the mythology long after he would have lived. This period of Dark Age Greece and the Mediterranean seems to have pushed this fledgling Mycenaean culture out of Crete with the arrival of the Dorians out from the west and pushed them east. According to this article and theory, these people left Crete to travel to Mount Ida before allowing this cow to wander and lie down, choosing the place to build this hypothesized Ilium? Well, Mount Ida is, as I say, some 60 or so kilometres from Hisarlik, so I doubt the cow ever wandered such distances, and secondly, there is no record of Hisarlik ever being called Ilium, nor archaeology or literary context to support this mythological founding of Hisarlik. With the location having been settled from 5,000 to 2,500 years ago, there's no record at all anywhere, any account that this is Troy, which makes zero sense to the time frame of the mythology, for the location being Troy of the Iliad, with the tale being a fabricated tale of later mythology, or a retelling of an older story from further back into antiquity, perhaps even being in another location altogether, as I hypothesize along with others. I have mentioned about these claims of an earlier Trojan conflict taking place in Anatolia, though there are no surviving records or any later records, nor do we have any documented accounts of activities on the island of Crete from around 1200 to 800 BC making such claims. So there's no claim on the island of Crete that the people lived there, travelled over to Anatolia. There's nothing. As mentioned in our previous conversation, pinpointing exact dates is difficult due to a number of reasons. However, it is known that the Dorian-speaking immigrants settled on Crete in the period of around 3,000 years ago. I would claim, as stated also, of a migrational force of people from the west as detailed in previous other videos. The Dorian invasion is a concept seemingly devised by historians of ancient Greece to explain the replacement of this pre-classical dialects and traditions in southern Greece by the ones that prevailed into classical Greece. There seems to be a bit of animosity towards the southern part of Greece. There are no records that I am aware of from Crete or any other location nearby that claim either way, if there was an invasion or a migration, though the use of the British tin has been found, and the agricultural link is well publicised, linking Britain to this area of the Eastern Mediterranean going way back, way back. Many minor Greek settlements are known around the coast of Anatolia, but formed in the centuries much later. The Luwian language, which the guy referenced in the article that there was Luwian texts. Well, the Luwian language is not a Greek language, unless, this is the big caveat, unless it was this language that was replaced on Crete by the Dorians and their subsequent migrational force / the Trojan or British peoples, as it is closer related, the Luwian language this is, to the cultures further east or to the south, even as far as Egypt, rather than linear A or linear B, so which closer resembles the runic systems found in the north and the west of Europe or Western Mediterranean. Excuse me, my throat is super dry. As I've already touched on, Dithytes Cretinus or Dithytes of Crete, funny enough, and Dares Phrygius works are both commonplace in Europe during the Middle Ages, with detailed accounts, which are provided in this book of mine available on Amazon. I'll give myself a little shout out there, which is there. Again, if anyone hasn't read these accounts, you don't even have to read my book, just go out there and get the accounts and read it and compare it to the Homeric poems. It's apples and oranges in some ways, and their writings were Latin renditions and all that survives, as there were no Greek copies. Only theory that they were copied from Greek, as discussed in the video on these two writers, which it's an interesting video worth checking out. So in closing, there are no copies of any of the cited or quoted materials to be found in Greece, from Crete to Athens, not the Hittites, from Cappadocia to Hattusia. Only later authors' renditions to whom operated on the premise of a far older conflict, And to be fair, Teucer is said to be mythological, whilst the Aeneid, which was by Virgil, is focused on the grand scale of the city of Rome and its empire, its formation and its destiny with the older form of the Olympian gods, a constitution, as was a common theme of power projection by Rome. It's interesting that, certain Romans felt the desire to align themselves with the Greeks, which they actually conquered, so I don't understand why they'd have to big the Greeks up so much. As far as I'm aware, Virgil's accounts are of the same date as Homer for the conflict, whilst Herodotus, dubbed the father of history, placed the Trojan War almost 800 years before his time, and Eratosthenes, sorry, it's been a long recording, was more specific, dating the war at 1184 to 83 BCE for the start of the conflict. And both of these men were Greek, so even the Greeks that do make reference to the Trojan War and really paid attention, really wrote about it, they give far older dates than this article. This article, like I said, claims the conflict took place in the 8th century BCE, and yet these two claim that, along with Homer, well, Homer doesn't actually give a date, but they use the Homeric poems and stuff like that, and they've looked back into their history, and that's the dates that these have come up with. So there we go, guys, that's like the end of the video, what I've typed out. And to be honest, I apologise, I had a scratchy throat pretty much all the way through that, and I could have typed that out better. I kind of rushed it a little bit, and I should have took a little bit more time because it was quite lengthy, and some bits were a bit disjointed. Might have repeated myself a couple of times in there, so I can only apologise for that. But just before we do go, I want to take a quick look at a couple of links that I will be putting in the description so people can check out and let me know what they think. So there's an interesting part I wanted to read from this article. So, ingots of tin found in Bronze Age shipwrecks off the coast of Israel were smelted in southwest England, suggesting an ancient trade route existed between the two regions. So that's that link that we were talking about. The researchers analysed tin and lead isotopic and trace elements in 27 ingots from archaeological sites in Israel, Turkey, and, get on this, the Greek island of Crete, of course, dating from about 3,200 years ago. So that again is the exact ballpark we're talking about. Apologies for this scratchy throat. That is the exact ballpark we're talking about of this migrating sea peoples and this conflict in Britain. Now, I don't think you can. We've got archaeological references now, we've got linguistical, and we've got there's a whole raft of things that are justifying this movement along the Mediterranean. Obviously, we're going to discuss, as I say, when I start reading some of that book, that there's an older cultural link as well, but we'll save that. The ancient tin formed into bars and plates was probably destined, making bronze a technology that powerfully influenced the development of ancient cultures. And to be honest, I don't really need to go through any more of this specific article. It has got an image on a map, which obviously, as hopefully I've already done, there's already plenty of imagery in this video for you. The mines were in Devon and Cornwall are the most two likely sources for this tin. So there we go, guys. Unfortunately, I've just tried copying and pasting that with a link, and I must have missed one of the digits off there or something when I've copied it, and it's saying it's a dead link, but all that link was basically saying the same thing. So I'm going to end the video there. Like I say, it's been a pretty long recording. Thanks for anyone who stuck in there. And yeah, so we've got many links that we're starting to establish now, and we still haven't even fully broke apart Great Britain and East Anglia and looked at all the archaeological evidence there. There's more things that I keep coming across that I keep adding notes, and I've got so many notes in my phone where I sit there and I go through it all and cross-reference off different websites and keep building and building and building, as well as doing the reading and things like that. So there's still a lot to come. I'd like to thank anyone, like I say, who stuck in there this long, and hopefully I'll catch us all in the next video. Like I say, there's a few readings from a few of these books that I want to start going through, because it's all well and good me typing out a lot of this information and presenting it, but it's not all my information. I do a lot of connecting of dots, like this Dorian culture, linking it to the Sea Peoples, and then, you know, we've got the tin find and things like that. It's all well and good, but it adds more credit to what I'm saying if there's other people who've got more analysis that I can add on top of that. So like I say, stay tuned. I'm going to do a couple of readings from a few books in the next videos. They're going to be less all over the place and more structured, because these people obviously write a lot better than I do. But yeah, thanks again for stopping by. Hope you all have a lovely day. Stay safe. Peace.